The sun was setting outside, throwing this orange glow through the living room windows. Everything felt still, like the whole house was holding its breath. I was sitting there, holding my coffee mug, but the coffee had gone cold a long time ago. Didn't even matter. The house felt cold now, like it was just a place where things used to happen but didn't anymore. I stared at the family picture above the fireplace. A year ago, it had been a memory I could look at and smile. Now, it felt like a lie. In the photo, Alex was holding his baseball bat, looking proud, not a care in the world. Lily was clutching Mr. Cuddles, her stuffed rabbit, wide-eyed, the picture of innocence. And then there was Isabella. She stood right there with us, but she wasn't really with us. She was half-turned, a little apart from the rest of the family. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Looked rehearsed. I didn't catch it then, but I saw it now. She'd been pulling away for a while. And I'd missed it. I had been so wrapped up in trying to hold it all together that I hadn't noticed how much she'd checked out. The picture was just a snapshot, but the distance between us? That had been growing for months, maybe even years. A faint creak on the floor broke me out of my thoughts. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. Isabella. She walked in, heels clicking, her presence filling the room before she even spoke. She was in one of those suits again, the ones she wore when she wanted to remind me just how important she was. Dark blue, tailored perfectly to her frame. Black leather briefcase in one hand. I could practically smell the expensive perfume before she even said anything. Something floral and strong, like she wore it to mask everything else. "Nathan," she said, not looking up from her tablet, "the kids' schedules are on the counter. I have a call in 10 minutes. I couldn't help but feel irritated. She had the time to call me in here, but not even a second to acknowledge me? "The school called," I said, trying to keep it together. "They need both signatures for Alex's field trip." She didn't even blink. "Just sign it for me, Nathan. You know how packed my schedule is." My jaw clenched. I felt the heat in my chest, but I held it in. They specifically asked for both signatures. "It's an overnight trip." Isabella sighed, barely looking up from her screen. It was the kind of sigh you give when you're inconvenienced by someone else's basic needs. Her fingers drummed impatiently on her tablet. "Fine," she said. "Where is it?" I handed her the slip, and she grabbed it without even glancing at it. The woman couldn't even take 2 seconds to look at what she was signing. She just flicked her wrist and signed her name, her diamond wedding ring catching the light. She didn't notice. She never noticed. I spoke to the school again. I pushed, even though I could feel my patience wearing thin. "They're hoping both of us can make it to Alex's science fair next week." Isabella didn't even look up from her emails. "Of course they are. What's next? Another night of foam volcanoes and baking soda? That what you want, Nathan?" She scoffed, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Sorry, I have a board meeting that day. Some of us have real responsibilities." I could feel my blood boil, but I kept my voice steady. "Our kids' achievements are responsibilities too, Isabella." Her eyes finally met mine, and there was no warmth in them, only contempt. "Really?" she shot back, her lip curling into something ugly. "Like what? The mortgage? The private school tuition? The tutor we pay to make sure they're ahead of their class? Maybe you should think bigger, Nathan." I wanted to snap back. I wanted to tell her that I was doing everything I could, that I had been the one holding it all together while she worked on her next big promotion. But what good would it do? She didn't care. She hadn't cared for a long time. "Yeah," I said, my voice tight. "I'm here. Every day. I support this family in my own way." I had to stop myself from saying more. It wasn't worth it. Without stepping on anyone else. She just smirked at me, the way she always did when she thought she'd won. "Oh, I know. You're the one who stays home, handling the small stuff, while I'm out here building the future." I wanted to argue. I wanted to scream that this, the family, was the future. But what was the point? Before I could say anything else, Alex appeared in the doorway. His backpack was slung over one shoulder, his face full of hope. "Mom, did you sign my permission slip? And are you coming to my science fair next week?" For a second, Isabella's face softened, but only for a second. It was gone almost as soon as it appeared, replaced by that practiced fake smile. The permission slip signed, "Sweetheart. But I have an important meeting during the science fair, remember? You understand, right?" Alex's face fell. He didn't argue though. He just nodded, turning back toward the stairs. I could see the disappointment in his eyes, but he didn't let it show. Not for her. He'd learned better than to expect anything. Then Lily came down the stairs, holding a drawing in her hands. Her little feet bounced with excitement as she rushed to Isabella, holding it out like it was the most important thing in the world. "Look, Mommy. I drew our family today." Isabella barely even looked at it. She waved her hand dismissively. "Not now, honey. I'm late for an important meeting." Lily's face dropped. She tried to hide it, but I saw it. I saw the hurt in her eyes. She wasn't even asking for much. Just a moment of her mother's time. I knelt down to Lily's level, taking the picture from her hands. "Of course I want to see it, sweetheart," I said softly. "Tell me all about it." She started to explain her drawing, her voice full of that excitement only a child could have. But my mind wasn't fully there. I caught Alex's eye on the stairs. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at his sister. His face was a mirror of what I'd seen in mine earlier, the silent resignation. A look no child should have. And suddenly, the weight of it all hit me. I had been patient. I had tried to keep it together for them, for the kids. But I was done. Done with pretending things were fine when they clearly weren't. Done with waiting for her to notice that she was losing us, that she was losing me. Isabella was too busy building her future to even see her family crumbling around her. And I couldn't keep pretending that we were okay when everything I'd built was falling apart. The silence in the house was deafening, and I realized, for the first time in a long while, I wasn't just angry anymore. I was something else. Something deeper. Something I couldn't ignore. The next few days felt like living in a fog. Everything around me seemed to move in slow motion, but inside? Inside, it was like I was sprinting through quicksand. It was hard to breathe, harder to focus. Every time I saw Isabella, I felt like I was sinking further. She was always in her own world. Emails, calls, meetings. She'd come and go, walk through the house like she was some kind of high-powered executive and I was just the guy who kept the place running. She never asked how I was doing, never noticed how much I'd changed, how much we'd changed. It was like I was invisible. And then, the little things, the things I used to brush off, the things I thought I could handle, started hitting me harder. The kids kept asking about the science fair. Alex kept talking about how much he was looking forward to it, how he really hoped she'd come. But I could see the way his face fell every time she brushed him off. He'd stop asking, just like he stopped asking for anything else. Lily wasn't much better. She'd make little drawings, little notes about how much she loved us, how she thought we'd be happy forever. But every time Isabella walked in, Lily's excitement would vanish. It was like she already knew. She already knew her mom didn't care enough to look at her drawings, didn't care enough to ask how her day was. She was only interested in what she was doing, and I was stuck in the middle of it. I couldn't get through to her. Every time I tried, she'd shut me down, make some excuse about her schedule or how busy she was. It didn't take long for me to stop talking altogether. There was no point. But what really got to me was the way Isabella lied. It was like she believed her own bullshit. She'd tell me one thing and then do the complete opposite, like she thought I was too stupid to notice. She'd promise to be home for dinner, then send a text saying she had a last-minute meeting that ran late. She'd say she'd come to the kids' school event, then bail out at the last second. The worst part was the way she'd act like it was normal, like it was okay for her to be absent from her own family and I should just accept it. It wasn't okay. It wasn't normal. But what was I supposed to do? What could I do? She was always right. She had the career, the title, the success. I was just the guy at home. The guy who did the small stuff. That's how she saw me. But that night, it was different. I could feel something shifting inside me. It was like all the years of walking on eggshells, of tiptoeing around her moods and her demands, were finally coming to a head. The kids had gone to bed early, both of them exhausted from a long week of school. I had just finished cleaning the kitchen, stacking the dishes in the sink, when I heard her heels clicking down the hallway. She was back late again. Late from what? I didn't know. And at this point, I didn't care. I had reached the point where I was just done asking. I just wanted her to notice. I wanted her to see how much I had been carrying, how much we had been carrying. I wanted her to finally look at me and admit that this wasn't working. That she wasn't working. But when she walked into the kitchen, all she had for me was that damn tablet in her hands. "Nathan," she said, barely glancing up. "I'm sorry, but I've got to prep for a board meeting tomorrow. Can you handle the kids' lunch in the morning?" My stomach twisted. That was how it always went. You handle it. Everything was always dumped on me. The school stuff, the dinner, the kids' activities. She never had time for any of it. But me. I was always the one who had to make it all work. And if I couldn't, well, that was on me too. I opened my mouth to say something. I was ready to unload. Ready to tell her how I felt, how tired I was of her excuses. But before I could, she cut me off, her voice distant. "I'm really tired tonight, Nathan. I just can't deal with more right now." The words hit me like a slap. She couldn't even pretend anymore. She didn't even try to hide it. I stood there for a second, watching her. Her back was turned, her fingers flying over the screen of her tablet. And I realized then, she didn't see me. She didn't see any of us. She was too busy building a life that didn't include the family she promised to love. A life that didn't even have room for her kids, let alone her husband. "Yeah," I said, the words coming out slower than I intended. "I can handle it." I turned and walked out of the kitchen. I was about to head upstairs when I stopped, right in the middle of the hallway. My heart was beating hard, my chest tight, and I knew, something was about to break. I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep living in the shadow of someone who couldn't even bother to show up for her own family. She didn't care anymore, and every day I let her get away with it, I was losing a little bit more of myself. The truth hit me like a freight train. She wasn't coming back. Not to me. Not to us. And I didn't think I could keep pretending that I was fine with it. I felt the rage start to bubble up inside me. It wasn't a new feeling, but it had been buried for so long, I hadn't even realized it was there. It was like a switch had been flipped inside me. I was done being the good guy. I was done being the one who kept it all together. I was done. I turned around and went back into the kitchen. The air in the room felt thick, like I couldn't breathe. I knew what I was doing was drastic, but it didn't matter anymore. I needed her to understand. I needed her to feel what I was feeling, what we were all feeling. That night, sleep didn't come easy. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, the hum of the streetlights outside the only thing that kept me tethered to the present. Isabella's breathing was steady beside me, but I couldn't find any peace in it. It was like the distance between us was an actual thing, a wall that had built itself brick by brick over the years, and now I was stuck on one side of it, looking at a stranger on the other. I couldn't stop thinking about the kids. Alex and Lily, they deserved better. They deserved more than a mother who only showed up when it was convenient for her. And I deserved more than being her sidekick in this life we'd built. I was done with feeling invisible. Done with sitting here like I was okay, when everything inside me was slowly being torn apart. I heard the faint click of her phone alarm the next morning, followed by the shuffle of her feet on the floor as she rolled out of bed. I kept my eyes shut, pretending to sleep, but my mind was already awake, already thinking about how things were about to change. There was no way I was going to let this keep happening. I wasn't some accessory in her perfect little life. I wasn't just the guy who handled the mess when she couldn't be bothered. I waited for her to leave for work, like I always did. She kissed me on the cheek as she rushed out the door, muttering something about a conference call she couldn't afford to miss. I didn't say anything in return. What was the point? She wouldn't even notice if I did. The moment the door closed behind her, it was like something snapped. I took a deep breath, the weight of the decision I was about to make settling in my chest. It wasn't a rash decision, not in the way I thought it would be. This had been coming for a while, a slow burn that I'd ignored for far too long. But today, I was going to do something about it. I grabbed my phone and texted my brother. "I need you to take the kids for a couple of days. It's important. Please," he replied almost immediately. What's going on, bro? You good? I didn't have the words to explain, not yet. So I kept it simple. Just trust me. I'll explain later. But I need you. He must have sensed something was off because he didn't ask further questions. Just said, you got it. I'll swing by after work to pick them up. I didn't waste any time. I headed upstairs to the kids' rooms, the weight of what I was about to do making my hands shake. Alex was still sleeping, the covers kicked off, his baseball bat propped up against the bed. It was a small, quiet thing that broke my heart. He didn't even have to say anything anymore. He just knew this wasn't the family he thought it was. I went into Lily's room next. She was still holding on to Mr. Cuddles, her little face peaceful in sleep. It hurt to wake her, but I knew it had to be done. I needed them to understand. I needed to give them something better than this house full of empty promises. Lily, sweetie, I whispered, gently shaking her shoulder. We're going somewhere special for a couple of days, okay? She blinked awake, her eyes wide with excitement. Really? Where? Are we going to the zoo? I smiled, my heart breaking all over again. Not the zoo, sweetheart. But we're going somewhere you'll love. Go pack a bag, all right? She didn't need to be told twice. She jumped out of bed and raced to the closet, grabbing a pink backpack she loved. I could see her already imagining adventures in her mind, her little world full of possibility. And I wished I could believe in that world too, wished I could pretend everything was fine for just one more day. When Alex woke up, it was harder. He rubbed his eyes, still half asleep, and when I told him what was happening, his face fell. Wait. Where's Mom? I could hear the panic in his voice, and it gutted me. She's at work, buddy. We'll be back soon. But, will she be with us? He asked quietly, almost like he didn't want to hear the answer. I wanted to lie. I wanted to say, of course she will. But I couldn't. So I just shook my head. Not this time, Alex. But we'll be all right. I promise. It was like I was pulling a thread, unraveling everything I'd worked to keep together for the kids. But I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep pretending that things were okay. The hardest part wasn't the anger I felt, or even the betrayal. It was the guilt that came with it. The guilt of dragging them into something they didn't understand. By the time Isabella came home that evening, everything was packed up. I had written a note, though, one that I'd left on the kitchen counter for her. The kids were already gone. I was gone. And everything was about to change. I could hear her heels click down the hallway when she arrived, the familiar sound of her walking in after another long day. She called out, but I didn't respond. I just waited in the other room, my hands clenched at my sides. It was a long time before she came into the kitchen, her voice sharp with annoyance. Nathan? What the hell is going on here? Why aren't you answering me? I didn't say anything. I couldn't bring myself to explain it to her. Not anymore. Her eyes went straight to the counter, where the note sat. She picked it up, read it, and her face went pale. Then she looked around the house, like she was seeing it for the first time. Empty. The kids' rooms untouched. The silence of the house was deafening. What is this? She demanded, her voice cold. Where are the kids? What the hell have you done? I didn't raise my voice. Didn't need to. I took them. We're gone. Her expression shifted, disbelief, anger, confusion all mixing together. You just took them? Her voice cracked. Why? I let out a long breath, holding her gaze. You were never here, Isabella. You haven't been here for a long time. Her jaw clenched, and for a second, I thought she might yell. But instead, she went quiet, her face a mask of frustration. She tried to say something, but the words wouldn't come out. And honestly, I didn't need to hear them. Her perfect life, her board meetings, her high-rise office, her awards, none of it mattered anymore. Because, for the first time, I had taken something away from her. I had taken what she thought she could afford to lose. The revenge wasn't in what I did. It was in the silence. In the void left behind, where her family used to be. And I wasn't going to make this easy on her. She'd taken enough from us already. It wasn't until I was in the car, driving away with Alex and Lily, that the reality of what I'd done really hit me. The streets blurred past, the house fading in the rearview mirror, and I felt this weird sense of calm wash over me. But it wasn't relief. No, it was more like the quiet after a storm. The thunder had cracked, and now, I was waiting for the aftermath. Lily, of course, was chattering away in the back seat, her excitement bubbling over like she hadn't noticed anything was wrong. She didn't understand what had just happened, what I had just done. She was still clinging to Mr. Cuddles, her little fingers tightly wrapped around the worn-out rabbit. I couldn't help but feel this knot in my chest. She was too young to get it, too innocent. And part of me wanted to shelter her from all this, wanted to tell her everything was going to be okay. But that would have been a lie. I didn't know what was going to happen next. Alex was quieter. He hadn't said much since we left the house, just stared out the window, his face pensive. His shoulders were tense, like he was waiting for some kind of bomb to go off. He wasn't stupid. He knew something had changed. He could feel it just like I could. "Dad," Alex said after a long silence, his voice low, almost hesitant. "Where are we going?" I glanced at him in the rearview mirror, trying to catch his eyes. But he was looking out the window, his face pale. He probably didn't want to hear the answer. He didn't want to know why we were leaving. But I couldn't lie to him. "We're going to your uncle's place," I said, my voice rough. "We're just gonna stay there for a bit. Get away from all of this." "Is Mom coming?" he asked, barely above a whisper. I swallowed hard. The weight of his question hit me like a brick. I could feel my own throat tighten. How could I explain it? How could I tell him that his mother, our mother, hadn't been here for months? That her idea of family was a text message saying, "I'm busy"? How could I tell him that the woman who was supposed to be the heart of this family had already checked out? "No, Alex," I said softly. "She's not coming." Alex didn't say anything after that. He just sat there, his hands in his lap, his eyes distant. I could tell he wasn't crying, not yet. But I could also tell he was holding it all in. And part of me wanted to reach back there and tell him that everything was going to be okay. But I couldn't make promises I couldn't keep. We spent the rest of the drive in silence. I tried not to think about Isabella, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face. Confused, angry, hurt. She was probably tearing the house apart right now, looking for us, wondering where the hell we'd gone. And maybe she was. But honestly, that was the point. She had to feel the weight of this. She had to understand what it felt like to be left behind. By the time we reached my brother's house, it was late. The kids were both tired, and I could see the tension in Alex's shoulders ease just a bit when he saw his uncle's big, familiar front door. They were safe. For now. My brother Jason answered the door with a wide grin, but it quickly faded when he saw the look on my face. "Jesus, man, what happened?" he asked, stepping aside to let us in. I didn't answer right away. I just took a deep breath and followed the kids inside. They were already running off toward the living room, their laughter light, their worries put on pause for the moment. Jason watched me closely, his brows furrowed. "I need you to take care of them," I said, the words coming out before I could stop them. I need you to keep them safe. I need space to figure this out." Jason didn't question it. He just nodded and walked toward the living room. But I could see the concern in his eyes. He could tell something was wrong. He could tell I wasn't the same. And hell, I wasn't. I walked into the kitchen, leaning against the counter, running my fingers through my hair. I felt a weird mix of guilt and anger. The guilt that I'd taken the kids away from their mother. The anger that she hadn't been the one to care about them enough to notice. I wasn't sure which emotion weighed heavier. Jason found me a few minutes later, a beer in his hand, and handed it to me wordlessly. He leaned against the counter next to me, letting me gather my thoughts. "You doing all right?" he asked after a long pause. "Am I doing all right?" I repeated, a little louder than I meant to. "I just took my kids and left, Jason. I have no idea what's gonna happen when I go back. Or if I even want to go back. But she doesn't care. She hasn't cared for months." "I know," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "But man, you've gotta remember, the kids don't know what's going on. They don't need to know yet. They'll figure it out soon enough. But you have to think about them." "I'm thinking about them," I said, my voice breaking for the first time in days. I can't keep pretending like everything's fine. I can't be the one holding this family together when she doesn't even want to be here. I'm done being invisible, Jason. He nodded. I get it. I really do. But right now, you need to focus on the kids. They need to feel safe. You'll figure the rest out, one step at a time. But right now, you've got them. It wasn't much, but it was enough. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like I wasn't alone in this. Jason was here. He was always here when I needed him. And as long as I had him, I could figure the rest out. Isabella didn't call that night. I expected her to. I expected her to reach out, to demand answers, to yell, to beg me to come back. But she didn't. The silence stretched on, and it only deepened the knot in my stomach. I didn't need her to call though. I already knew what it meant. She wasn't looking for me. She wasn't looking for us. And that, in itself, was the most painful part. The days at Jason's were quiet, almost eerily so. The house was filled with the sound of the kids' laughter, the occasional argument over a toy or a video game, but nothing that felt as suffocating as the silence back at our old house. It was as if the world outside had stopped spinning, and for the first time in a long time, I could actually breathe. Lily and Alex were adjusting better than I thought they would. Lily was in her element, running around Jason's place like she owned the place, pulling out puzzles and crayons, excited to show off her art to anyone who'd listen. Alex, on the other hand, stayed quieter, but he didn't seem scared, just distant. He wasn't asking for anything big, but I could tell something was off. Maybe it was the change of scenery, maybe it was the absence of his mother. He wasn't as carefree as Lily, but I think he was trying to figure out what to make of all this. As for me, I spent most of my time on the couch, lost in my own thoughts. I wasn't ready to face Isabella, not yet. The guilt of taking the kids was heavy, but the anger was heavier. I kept thinking about all the things I'd let slide over the years, her late nights at the office, the business trips that kept her away for days, the subtle ways she'd checked out from the family, from me. I didn't miss her. Not in the way I thought I would. I missed what we were before all of that. I missed the person I thought she was, but that version of her didn't exist anymore. The woman I was left with, the one who barely acknowledged me, who couldn't make time for the kids or for us, wasn't the woman I married. I hadn't heard from her since I left, and honestly, I didn't know how to feel about it. Part of me expected her to come running, to demand I come back, to tell me it was all a mistake. But she didn't. She didn't even try to call the kids. And that hurt more than anything. One afternoon, a few days after we'd left, Jason took the kids out to the park. He was trying to give me some space, which I appreciated. It gave me a chance to sit on the porch and think about what was next, about where to go from here. I knew I couldn't stay at Jason's forever, and eventually, I was going to have to deal with Isabella. The longer I waited, the harder it was going to be. I thought about calling her, but I didn't. I wasn't ready. Instead, I pulled out my phone and stared at the screen for a while. I wasn't looking for anything, really. I just didn't know what else to do. That's when I saw it. A message from her, just sitting there. Nathan, we need to talk. Please. I don't know what's going on, but you can't just take the kids and leave like this. You need to come back. For a second, I just stared at the words, unsure of what to do with them. There was no apology, no sign that she realized what she'd done. It was all about her, about what she wanted, what she needed. She didn't ask about the kids, didn't even acknowledge that I might have had a reason for doing what I did. It was just her, as usual, wanting everything to go back to the way it was, as if none of this mattered. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes, feeling the weight of it all crash down on me again. I didn't know if I was ready to hear her side, or if I even cared about her side anymore. I let it sit for a while. Later that night, when the kids were already asleep, I sat in the kitchen, staring at the message again. This time, it was different. I didn't feel the need to yell, to argue. I didn't even feel angry. I just felt tired. I could hear her voice in my head now, the way she'd always told me to handle things, to be patient, to just wait for things to get better. But I didn't want to wait anymore. I didn't want to be patient. I typed out a response. We'll talk when I'm ready. But I'm not coming back right now. I need space, and I need you to understand why I did what I did. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. I couldn't go back to the way things were, not after everything. Not after she had checked out of our marriage, out of our family, long before I ever made this decision. It felt strange to hit send, like I was setting something into motion that couldn't be undone. I wasn't sure where this was headed, but one thing was clear. I wasn't going to sit around waiting for her to figure it out anymore. She had her chance. That night, I didn't sleep much. The message hung over me, the sound of her phone pinging every few minutes, like she was hoping I'd change my mind. But I didn't. The next morning, Jason was in the kitchen making coffee when I walked in. He didn't ask me how I was doing, didn't question my mood, but there was something in the way he looked at me, like he knew I had crossed some kind of line. I didn't even have to say anything. Got your message, he said, his voice quiet. You sure about this? I nodded. Yeah, I'm sure. He didn't push. He just nodded back, handing me a mug of coffee. All right, man. Whatever you need. For a moment, I just stood there, holding the mug. Everything felt like it was teetering on the edge, like one wrong move, and it would all come crashing down. But at the same time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Control. Power. For the first time in a long time, I was the one making the decisions. And maybe that was the hardest part about all of this. I didn't need her anymore. I didn't need Isabella to complete me, to make my life whole. I had the kids. I had my brother. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough for now. I hadn't expected Isabella to show up at Jason's place so soon. I figured she'd be too proud to come looking for me, too busy with whatever meeting or project had taken her away from our family for months. But here she was, standing in the doorway of Jason's living room one Thursday afternoon, like she had every right to be there. Like everything between us hadn't already unraveled. Alex was in the kitchen with Jason, helping him chop up veggies for dinner. Lily was with me, sitting on the couch, showing me a drawing she'd made in the park. When I saw Isabella through the window, I froze for a moment. It wasn't just her presence that threw me off, it was how she stood there, tall and rigid, her hands clasped in front of her like she was about to deliver some corporate pitch. Her expression was cool, calculated. Her gaze wasn't soft. It wasn't apologetic. It was demanding, like she was expecting me to just fall in line again. I stood up slowly, not sure what to expect. She hadn't called since I'd sent that message, and part of me had hoped that maybe she'd finally get the point, that I wasn't going to just let her back in, not like this. But here she was, walking into my brother's home as though she had the right to. Isabella, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. My hand was on the back of the couch, gripping it like it was the only thing holding me up. What are you doing here? She didn't flinch. Didn't even look surprised. If anything, she looked more irritated that I wasn't falling over myself to welcome her back. I came to talk, she said, her voice tight, controlled. Talk? I repeated, the disbelief bleeding through. About what? About how you've been gone for months. About how you haven't even noticed the kids are struggling. Her eyes narrowed. I didn't come here to be attacked, Nathan. I let out a short, bitter laugh. What else is there to say? You left. You checked out. You've been so caught up in your career, you didn't even notice when the walls started closing in. She took a step forward, but I didn't budge. I didn't leave you. I didn't abandon anyone. I've been working, Nathan. You think I just went off and started living some other life? I've been doing what I had to do for this family. For this family? I echoed, my anger creeping up. Don't talk to me about, for this family. What about Alex? What about Lily? They needed you, Isabella. They needed their mom, and you were too busy in your meetings to even notice. Isabella's lips pressed into a thin line, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something that resembled guilt, flash in her eyes. But it was gone before I could grab hold of it. You don't understand, she said, her voice softening, but only slightly. I'm doing this for them. For us. I'm making sure that our kids have a future, that we have a future. I'm doing what I have to do, Nathan. I shook my head, feeling the weight of her words press down on me. But I wasn't going to let her get away with this. Not anymore. Really? Because it seems to me like you're doing what you have to do. You've been gone for so long, Isabella. You've been building your empire while your family fell apart. And the worst part? You didn't even notice. You didn't even care. She took another step toward me, her eyes flashing with frustration now. You're not being fair. You knew what this was like when we got married. You knew I wanted more than just a 9-to-5 job and a suburban life. I'm doing what's best for all of us. Best for all of us? I nearly shouted. The kids don't need your fancy career, Isabella. They need you. I don't know when you stopped seeing that, but I'm not gonna let you keep pretending it's okay. I could feel the tension building, the heat of our words crackling in the air. This wasn't just about the kids anymore. This wasn't even about our marriage. This was about who we'd become, who she'd become. A stranger. I've always been there for them, Nathan, she said, almost pleading, though her voice lacked any real conviction. I'm doing everything for this family. Everything. You have no idea how hard it's been for me, either. You think I wanted to work late every night? You think I wanted to miss things? I didn't. But I had to. For all of us. I closed my eyes for a second, trying to calm the storm inside me. But it wasn't working. The words, the frustration, the anger, it all came pouring out. No, you didn't have to, I said, my voice quieter now. You didn't have to miss everything. You chose this. You chose your career over your family. And when things started falling apart, when the cracks started showing, you chose to stay in your little bubble. I'm not the one who walked away, Isabella. You did. The words hung between us, thick with accusation. She didn't say anything for a while, just stood there, staring at me with this blank look on her face. It was as if she was trying to process what I was saying, but it wasn't clicking. She just kept going back to her same old script, the one where she was the hero, the martyr, the one who was sacrificing everything for the greater good. And I was the one who wasn't getting it. Look, Nathan, she finally said, her tone dropping, trying to soften things. I know I haven't been perfect. But you're making this a lot harder than it needs to be. We can fix this, okay? We can work through it. But I need you to understand that this is how it has to be for now. This is how we'll get ahead. I shook my head, the weight of her words pushing me further away from her. She wasn't seeing it. She wasn't seeing how badly she had damaged everything. How the kids were just as lost as I was. I could see it now. She wasn't sorry. Not really. She was just trying to get everything back to her version of normal. And that was the final straw. You don't get it, Isabella, I said, my voice calm but firm. You're still talking like it's all about you. Like your future is the most important thing. But you're not the only one who has a future. I have the kids now. I'm their father. And I'm not going to sit by while you make your own choices at the cost of them. I'm done. Her eyes narrowed. You don't get to do this to me. You don't get to leave, take the kids, and then tell me how to live my life. I'm not telling you how to live your life, I said, the anger finally draining from my voice. But I'm not gonna let you destroy theirs. Not anymore. With that, I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there in the middle of Jason's living room. I could feel her gaze burning into my back as I went, but I didn't look back. It was over. It had to be. There was nothing left to salvage. The days that followed felt like a blur. Isabella didn't come back. She didn't try to contact me again after that confrontation. No calls. No messages. Not even a follow-up to check on the kids. She just disappeared. Like she'd always been able to, slipping into her own world, leaving me to clean up the mess. And maybe that was the hardest part. I didn't expect her to come crawling back, but I didn't expect the silence either. It felt like a void, like a gaping hole where everything we'd built used to be. Jason had been cool about everything. He didn't ask for details, didn't push for the why or how. He just let me take the lead with the kids, let me figure out what came next. But I could see the tension in his eyes when we were alone, the worry, like he was waiting for me to break down, waiting for the anger to catch up to me. But it didn't. Not yet, at least. I kept waking up early. The house was quiet in the mornings, the kids still asleep, and I had time to think. To think about everything. There were moments when I wondered if I'd made the right choice. If I'd overreacted. But then I'd see the way Lily hugged me at night, the way Alex would slip into my arms after school, and I knew I hadn't. The truth was, I'd been living on autopilot for too long. I had been playing the part of a husband, a father, but I wasn't living it. I was just surviving. And then there was Isabella. The woman I'd spent years with, the woman I thought I knew. She was still the same, still wrapped up in her world of board meetings and business trips. She couldn't see it. She couldn't see how broken we were, how broken I was. She couldn't see how much of me she'd chipped away, piece by piece, over the years. But I saw it. I saw it clearly now. There was no going back. The day I decided to call her was one of those gray, overcast mornings, when everything felt heavy and uncertain. The kids were at the table, eating cereal, laughing at some ridiculous joke Alex had made. It was peaceful. It was normal. I'd been holding off on making that call, but it had been 2 weeks. It felt like the right time. The only thing was, I had no idea what I was even going to say. I dialed her number, the digits on the screen almost blurring together, like I couldn't hold on to reality long enough to see it through. When she answered, her voice was distant, like she was surprised to hear from me. She didn't say anything at first, just a long pause, as if she was deciding whether to hang up or listen. "Nathan," she said, her voice tight. "What do you want?" It stung. That was it. Just her name. Nothing else. Not "how are the kids?" Not "I've been thinking about you." Just distance. "I'm not coming back, Isabella," I said, trying to sound calm, but I could hear my voice shaking. "But I want you to understand something. I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing this because I can't keep pretending like everything's okay. I can't keep pretending like you didn't abandon us." There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear her breathing, slow and steady, like she was trying to collect her thoughts. "Nathan, please," she said, her tone softer now, almost pleading. "I'm sorry. I know I've been distracted. But I love you. I love the kids. I was just trying to provide for us, to make sure we didn't end up like so many others. Struggling. I wanted a future." "Is that what you wanted? A future?" I asked, my voice rising without meaning to. "Because all I ever wanted was you. All I ever wanted was us, Isabella. I didn't care about your career. I didn't care about your meetings or your clients. I just wanted you to be here, with us. But you couldn't do that, could you?" She was silent for a moment. I thought she was going to hang up. I thought she was going to give up on me for good. But then I heard her voice again, small and almost broken. "I know I failed you. I know I didn't give you what you needed. But can't we try again? For the kids? For us." The words were like a slap to the face. Can't we try again? After everything? After the years of neglect? After everything she'd done, didn't do, now she wanted to fix it? It was too late for that. "No, Isabella," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's too late for that. You had your chance. We had our chances." She didn't say anything, just the sound of her shallow breathing on the other end of the line. "I've already made up my mind," I continued. "I'm not going back. Not for you. Not for anyone. I'm moving forward. I'm taking care of our kids, and I'm going to make sure they have everything they need. But it's not going to be with you." There was a long, painful silence. And then, quietly, she said, "I don't know what to say." And that was it. No apology. No grand realization. No anything. Just the silence that had stretched between us for so long, now stretching even farther. I could hear the weight of it in her voice. The realization that there was nothing left to fix. Nothing left to salvage. "I think we're done here," I said, my throat tight. "Goodbye, Isabella." I hung up the phone without waiting for a response. The kids didn't know exactly what had happened. They knew their mom was still working, still busy, but they didn't ask too many questions. They were adjusting. And so was I. The next few weeks were hard, but they were easier than I expected. We settled into a rhythm. The kids and I. We got used to the quiet mornings, the dinners without the awkward pauses, the days without the tension. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was actually living. Isabella's absence wasn't a hole in my life anymore. It was just space. Space for something new. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm not scared of it anymore. I know I'll be okay. I'll make sure of it. And if she ever comes back, she'll have to face the truth of what she did. Because the one thing I learned through all of this? You can't betray someone and expect them to come back to you like nothing happened. Some things, once broken, stay that way. And that's something you have to learn to live with. Thank you for watching this video to the end. What did you like most about this story? Write your answers in the comments. See you in the next video.